Alex had always loved the quiet mornings in their suburban neighborhood. The sun was just beginning to peek over the horizon, casting a warm golden glow across the well-manicured lawns and neat sidewalks. But what Alex cherished most was the small private field behind their home, a lush patch of grass, dotted with wildflowers and framed by towering oaks. It wasn't just a stretch of land, it was a sanctuary, a place where Alex could breathe, garden, and watch the neighborhood slowly come alive each day. For years, the field had been strictly for Alex and a few close neighbors who had been given permission by the HOA. The rules were clear: no unauthorized use, no roughhousing, and definitely no loud gatherings. It was a peaceful spot, meant to be respected. But today, something felt different. As Alex stepped outside, a faint but unmistakable sound broke the morning calm, the unmistakable laughter of children. Squinting toward the edge of the field, Alex's heart sank. There, kicking a soccer ball wildly, was Karen's son. Karen herself stood nearby, chatting casually with some other neighbors, completely ignoring the small sign Alex had placed by the field's entrance. Private property. Used by permission only. Alex's stomach twisted. Karen was a force in the community, always outspoken, always demanding things her way. She had a reputation for pushing boundaries, and yet no one dared challenge her openly. But this time, Alex couldn't let it slide. Taking a deep breath, Alex walked toward the group, hoping for a calm conversation. As they approached, Karen turned with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Morning, Alex," Karen called out, voice bright but edged with something sharp. "Just thought the kids could use some fresh air. Hope that's okay?" Alex's jaw tightened. "Karen, I've told you before, the field isn't a public park, it's private property, and you need permission before using it." Karen waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, come on. It's just a little kickabout. Nobody's getting hurt. The HOA never said it was off limits to kids." "That's not true," Alex said, firmly. "The HOA guidelines are clear. This field is maintained privately, and we ask neighbors to respect that." Karen shrugged. "Well, it's a beautiful space. Why keep it all to yourself?" Alex felt their patience fraying. "It's not about keeping it to myself. It's about safety and respect. I'm responsible for maintaining the field and unauthorized. Use damages the grass, and worse, it can be dangerous." Karen's smile tightened, and she glanced toward her son who was chasing the ball near the uneven edges of the field. "He's fine. You're just being overly cautious." Before Alex could respond, Karen turned away, pulling her child closer. "Look, if you're so worried, maybe you should install a fence or something." Alex watched as Karen's group began to drift back toward their homes, their laughter fading. But inside, a storm was building. As Alex stood there, a creeping sense of unease settled in. This was more than just a disagreement about a patch of grass. Karen's defiance felt personal and dangerous. Alex's mind raced. How many times had Karen ignored the signs? How often had she dismissed the neighborhood rules? And if something went wrong on the field, who would be held responsible? The morning sun climbed higher, but the shadow cast over the peaceful neighborhood felt heavier than ever. One thing was clear: this silent trespass was only the beginning. That evening, just as the neighborhood settled into a rare moment of calm, Alex's unease grew. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in bruised purples and reds, and the air held a heavy stillness, as if the world was bracing for something. Alex stepped outside again, hoping to find solace in the quiet. But the sight that greeted them made the blood drain from their face. Footprints, fresh and unmistakable, marred the carefully tended grass of the field. Tire tracks from a small bike crisscrossed the soft earth, gouging deep ruts in places. Alex's heart pounded. Someone had been here, without permission, again. The earlier confrontation with Karen replayed in Alex's mind, The way Karen had dismissed the rules, her casual insistence that the field was open to all. It was more than careless. It was reckless. Alex's eyes scanned the shadows at the edge of the field, where the fading light barely reached. A rustle, faint but distinct, broke the silence. "Hello?" Alex called softly, stepping forward. No answer. The hairs on Alex's neck prickled. Something was wrong. Minutes passed in tense stillness until movement flickered near the old oak tree. A figure slipped behind the trunk, too quick to catch, but enough to confirm Alex's growing fear. Karen was back. This time, she wasn't alone. Her son and a small group of neighborhood kids played noisily, climbing over the low fence that marked the field's boundary. Laughter rang out, carefree and loud, breaking every rule Alex held sacred. Alex clenched their fists, but forced themselves to stay calm. This wasn't just about property anymore. It was about control and respect. The field was more than grass and trees. It was a boundary, a symbol of order in the community. Gathering courage, Alex called out, "Firmly, Karen! This field is off limits without permission. You need to get off now." Karen turned, a flash of irritation crossing her face. "Alex, relax. They're just kids having fun. It's not like we're destroying the place." Alex swallowed the rising anger. "You're ignoring the rules. This field isn't a playground for everyone. It's private property and you're trespassing." Karen's voice sharpened. "You're so controlling. Why don't you lighten up for once?" Alex's eyes flicked to the uneven ground, where Karen's son was teetering dangerously close to a shallow ditch hidden beneath thick grass. "Watch out," Alex warned, stepping forward. Karen waved off the concern. "He's fine. Kids fall, all the time." A sudden crack echoed sharply as the boy slipped, tumbling down the embankment with a startled cry. Time seemed to freeze. Alex rushed forward, heart pounding, reaching the boy who was now sitting, rubbing his arm and wincing. Karen's face twisted from annoyance to panic. "See?" she snapped at Alex. "This is why you should keep your field open to everyone, so you can be responsible if something happens." Alex blinked in disbelief. The blame, the deflection, it was like a slap. But instead of anger, a cold resolve settled in. This incident wasn't going to be swept under the rug. Alex helped the boy up gently, checking for injuries. Nothing appeared. Broken, but the scare was real. Karen's eyes locked on Alex, fierce and accusatory. "If you'd taken better care of this place, none of this would have happened." Alex swallowed hard, knowing the fight was just beginning. As Karen gathered her son and the other kids retreating from the field, neighbors started to peek from their windows, whispering. Alex stood alone in the fading light, torn between anger and worry. The field had become a battleground, not just of property rights, but of neighborhood trust. And deep down, Alex wondered, how far would Karen go to claim what wasn't hers? The next morning dawned gray and heavy, the overcast sky mirroring Alex's restless thoughts. The previous evening's incident clung to their mind like a stubborn shadow, refusing to fade. They knew Karen's reckless use of the field wasn't just a minor nuisance anymore. It was a ticking time bomb. Alex decided to inspect the field, hoping to assess any damage and prepare for the inevitable confrontation that was looming. Alex stepped onto the grass. The signs of careless use were impossible to ignore. The once perfect green was marred with scuffed patches, broken twigs scattered about, and the deep tire tracks from a bike or small ATV gouged the soft earth. Each mark screamed of disrespect, and Alex's frustration grew with every step. At the edge of the field, near the steep embankment where Karen's son had nearly fallen, Alex noticed something more troubling. Fresh footprints led dangerously. Close to the edge, and some of the grass was flattened as if a small group had been sitting or climbing there frequently. It wasn't just one visit. This had been happening for days, maybe weeks. Alex's mind raced. They had warned Karen already, twice, but her disregard only seemed to escalate. Suddenly, movement caught Alex's eye. A figure darted quickly behind. A tree just beyond the field. Heart thudding, Alex called out, "Karen! I need to talk to you!" There was no answer. Minutes later, Karen appeared at the fence line, arms crossed and a stubborn set to her jaw. "Again," Alex started, voice tight. "You're still using the field without permission. You're damaging it." Karen smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Look, it's just kids playing. It's not like we're tearing the place apart. The HOA never said we couldn't use it." Alex shook their head. "The HOA guidelines are very clear, Karen. You're trespassing, and this is private property. This is why the fence is here, to keep people safe. The embankment is dangerous." Karen's smile faded, replaced by a defiant glare. "Your rules are ridiculous. My kid needs space to play, and you're selfish for keeping everyone out." Alex swallowed hard. "It's not selfish. It's about safety and respect. If someone gets hurt here because you ignore the rules, it's not just your problem. It could affect the whole neighborhood." Karen took a step closer, voice lowering. "Well, if your precious field is so dangerous, maybe you should fix it." Alex's patience snapped. "I do maintain it regularly. I've had the field inspected and cared for, but there's only so much I can do. This embankment isn't something I can just fix. You're putting your child and others at risk by ignoring the warnings." Karen's eyes flashed. "Maybe I don't care. Maybe I'm tired of you treating us like outsiders." Alex felt the sting of those words, but they refused to back down. "This isn't about us and them. It's about rules and safety. You're risking more than just grass here." Karen shook her head, turning away. "Whatever, Alex. If something happens, don't come crying to me." As Karen disappeared down the street, Alex stood alone, the weight of the conflict pressing down hard. The field, once a sanctuary, had become a battleground of wills. Later that day, Alex noticed tire tracks again, wider and deeper this time, as if a heavier vehicle had been driving through the field. Their hearts sank. This was no longer just about kids playing. It was escalating into something dangerous. Alex knew they had to act fast, if only to protect the field, their home, and possibly the neighborhood from disaster. But what action? And at what cost? The first warning sign had come, loud and clear, and now the real fight was just beginning. The air was heavy with a tense stillness as Alex went about their morning routine, but a nagging unease refused to fade. The escalating trespass on the field had rattled the normally peaceful neighborhood, and Alex could feel the weight of impending trouble looming just beneath the surface. That afternoon, just as the sun reached its highest point, Alex was inside their home when the unmistakable sound of frantic shouting pierced the calm. It was a sharp, panicked scream that sent chills down Alex's spine. Rushing outside, Alex saw neighbors pouring out of their homes, eyes wide with shock and confusion. At the center of the commotion was Karen, her face pale and drawn, clutching her son tightly. Alex's heart pounded as they pushed through the crowd, arriving just in time to see the boy cradling his arm, tears streaming down his cheeks. "He fell," Karen said breathlessly, her voice a mixture of fear and fury. "He slipped right where you warned us not to go. This is your fault. If you'd fixed the field properly, none of this would have happened." Alex felt the room tilt for a moment, the accusation like a blow. But beneath the rising anger was a gnawing worry. Was the injury serious? "Karen, calm down," Alex said carefully. "Where exactly did he fall?" Karen pointed toward the steep embankment at the edge of the field, the very spot Alex had warned about repeatedly. The uneven ground, hidden beneath thick grass, was treacherous, especially for a child running wild. Alex's gaze followed her finger, heart sinking. This was the danger zone they had tried to protect everyone from. Neighbors murmured. some glancing at Alex with sympathy, others shooting sideways looks at Karen. As Karen shouted about the dangerous field, Alex knelt beside the boy, gently checking his arm for swelling or breaks. The pain was obvious, but thankfully, the limb didn't look crooked. Still, the injury was enough to require medical attention. The tension ratcheted higher as Karen's accusations grew louder, her voice cutting through the crowd. This field is unsafe. Alex is neglecting their responsibility. We should demand the HOA take action immediately. Alex took a deep breath, fighting to maintain control. Karen, I've maintained the field regularly. The HOA guidelines are clear about its use and safety. You brought your child here without permission. Karen's glare turned icy. I don't care about your rules. You should have made this safe for everyone. The neighborhood split into murmurs of agreement and disagreement. Some sided with Karen's protective outrage, others with Alex's stance on responsibility and rules. The HOA president soon arrived, clipboard in hand, eyes narrowing as she surveyed the scene. What happened? Here, she demanded, her voice sharp. Karen wasted no time, pointing accusingly at Alex. This field is unsafe and improperly maintained. My son got hurt because of it. Alex met the president's gaze, holding firm. The injury was the result of unauthorized use. I have records of maintenance and warnings issued. This was a preventable accident. The president nodded thoughtfully, but made no immediate judgment. Meanwhile, the injured boy whimpered, caught in the middle of adult tensions. Alex felt a surge of guilt and helplessness. As paramedics arrived, the crowd began to disperse, leaving behind a charged atmosphere thick with resentment and blame. Back inside their home, Alex stared out the window at the now empty field, the sunlight casting long shadows over the grass. The accident had shattered the fragile peace, and the question hung heavy in the air: who would be held responsible? Who would take the blame? And what would happen to the field that had once been a sanctuary for so many? Alex knew one thing for certain: the conflict with Karen was far from over. If anything, it had only just begun. The community center was packed. Tension hung in the air like a thick fog as neighbors took their seats, whispering in low, anxious tones. The HOA board had called an emergency meeting to address the incident on Alex's field, a rare and serious matter for the quiet neighborhood. Alex sat near the front, hands clenched tightly in their lap, nerves gnawing at their resolve. Across the room, Karen sat with her arms crossed, her eyes blazing with a mix of anger and defiance. The room was divided. Some whispered support for Karen's claims, others silently backed Alex's side. The HOA president, Ms. Reynolds, stepped to the podium, clearing her throat. Thank you all for coming on such short notice. We're here today to discuss the recent accident involving Karen's son and the use of the private field behind Alex's home. She paused, scanning the room. This is a sensitive issue. We must consider the facts carefully and work toward a resolution that respects both safety and community harmony. Ms. Reynolds called Karen forward first. Karen's voice was steady, but charged with emotion as she addressed the room. My son was injured on that field because it's unsafe. Alex has ignored our concerns for months. The signs aren't enough, and they refuse to open the field for community use, which is unfair and selfish. If Alex cared about this neighborhood, this never would have happened. Murmurs of agreement rippled through part of the crowd. Karen's supporters nodded, eyes sympathetic. Next, Alex stood, heart pounding. I've maintained that field for years and have kept it in excellent condition. The HOA guidelines clearly state that it's private property and unauthorized use is prohibited. I warned Karen multiple times not to bring her child onto the field, but she ignored those warnings. Alex pulled out copies of maintenance logs, emails, and photos showing the condition of the field before and after the trespassing began. This injury is tragic, but it was preventable. The embankment where the boy fell is a natural feature, of the land, not something I can fix. It's the responsibility of all parents and residents to follow the rules for everyone's safety. The room was divided. Some nodded in approval, others shifted uncomfortably. Ms. Reynolds raised a hand, calling for order. We've heard both sides. Now I'd like to open the floor to questions and comments. A neighbor from down the street stood hesitantly. I think the signs are clear, but maybe more could be done to keep kids safe. Could a fence or barrier be added near the embankment? Another voice chimed in. Or maybe the HOA should consider turning the field into a proper park, so kids like Karen's son have a safe place to play. Alex felt their stomach twist. The idea of turning their private field into a public park was unsettling. It would mean losing the sanctuary they'd carefully maintained. Karen nodded eagerly. That's exactly what we need. Alex's rules only hurt the community. A murmur of agreement grew louder. Ms. Reynolds held up a hand. These are important points. However, changing the use of the field isn't a simple decision and would require approval from the entire HOA. She looked toward Alex. Alex, would you consider opening the field to community use if safety modifications were made? Alex hesitated. I'm willing to discuss compromises, but not if it means losing control or risking further damage and liability. Karen scoffed. That's just an excuse to keep everyone out. Tensions flared, voices rising. Suddenly, a quiet voice interrupted, a longtime resident named Mr. Jenkins, known for his fair judgments. Let's remember this is a community, not a battleground. Both sides want safety and peace. Maybe we need an independent inspection and a clear plan to address concerns. The room fell silent. Ms. Reynolds nodded thoughtfully. That's a reasonable suggestion. I propose we hire a professional to assess the field's safety and report. Back at the next meeting, the announcement was met with tentative approval. As the meeting adjourned, Alex and Karen exchanged a brief, cold glance. The war over the field was far from over. But for now, the battle had shifted to a new front: official scrutiny, community opinions, and the looming question of ownership and control. Outside, neighbors whispered and speculated, some sympathizing with Alex, others with Karen. The once united neighborhood now felt fractured, caught between rules and resentment. Alex took a deep breath. This was just the beginning of a long fight, one that would test not only their patience but the very fabric of their community. Days passed slowly, tension tightening its grip on the neighborhood. The promise of an independent inspection loomed over Alex like a storm cloud, stirring a mixture of hope and anxiety. On the morning of the inspection, Alex arrived early at the field, walking its perimeter with a practiced eye. Every blade of grass, every slope, every tree was etched into their memory. This place was their sanctuary, and now it felt like a courtroom waiting to pass judgment. When the inspector arrived, a stern, middle-aged woman named Ms. Carter, Alex greeted her cautiously. Ms. Carter wasted no time, pulling out her clipboard and beginning a thorough assessment. She measured the embankment slope, examined the grass for hidden hazards, and noted the tire tracks and damage from the recent trespasses. Hours passed as Ms. Carter worked quietly, jotting down notes. Alex answered her questions as honestly as possible, explaining the maintenance routine and the challenges posed by the natural terrain. When she finally packed up, Ms. Carter offered a measured smile. I'll prepare a detailed report for the HOA board. On the surface, the field is generally well maintained. However, the embankment is a legitimate safety concern, especially for unsupervised children. Alex nodded, expecting this conclusion. What do you suggest? A combination of improved signage, physical barriers like a low fence near the embankment, and clear communication about the field's private status. Also, regular monitoring to prevent unauthorized use. Alex sighed, relieved it wasn't worse, but also frustrated that more restrictions might be necessary. But then, as Ms. Carter gathered her things, Her expression shifted and she glanced around furtively. "Before I go, I should mention, I found something unusual." Alex frowned. "What do you mean?" Ms. Carter lowered her voice. "On the far edge of the field, beneath some loose soil, there appears to be some disturbed ground, like someone's been digging." Alex's heart skipped. "Digging? Why?" Ms. Carter shook her head. "I can't say. It's small. Maybe animal activity, but it looks deliberate. I thought you should know. Could be worth investigating before any new fencing is installed." Alex stared, the unease rising like a shadow. Someone had been on the field, and not just to play. That night, Alex couldn't sleep. The thought of secret digging disturbed the fragile peace they'd fought to protect. Early the next morning, Alex returned to the field, flashlight in hand, to examine the suspicious spot. Digging carefully with gloved hands, Alex uncovered a small rusted metal box buried just beneath the surface. Heart-pounding, they pried it open. Inside were old papers, faded letters, receipts, and a torn document marked with the HOA's logo. Alex flipped through them quickly, realization dawning. This wasn't just a forgotten box. It was evidence of something buried years ago, something no one was supposed to find. The papers hinted at an old dispute over the ownership of the field, with certain neighbors contesting Alex's family's rights to the property decades ago. Alex's mind reeled. Could this explain Karen's defiance? Was there a deeper conflict beneath the surface, one rooted in old grudges and secrets? As the moon rose again, Alex sat by the field's edge, clutching the documents. The quiet sanctuary they'd once known was now a battlefield of history, lies, and hidden agendas, and the real war was only just beginning. The next morning, Alex could barely focus. The rusted metal box and its contents weighed heavily in their mind, a puzzle piece that threatened to upend everything. Questions churned. Why had this box been buried? What secrets did these old documents hold? And most importantly, how did they tie into Karen's ongoing defiance? Determined to understand, Alex sought out the oldest resident in the neighborhood, Mrs. Henderson, a woman in her late 70s who had lived there for over 50 years. If anyone knew the tangled history of the field, it would be hers. Henderson's house smelled of lavender and old books, a comforting yet solemn place. Alex laid out the yellowed papers across her kitchen table. She peered closely at the faded handwriting, then sighed deeply. "Ah, yes," Mrs. Henderson began slowly. "This brings back memories some would rather forget." She explained that, decades ago, there had been a fierce dispute over the ownership of the field. Alex's family had purchased the land long before the neighborhood formed, but several other families, Karen's included, had contested the claim, alleging the land was community property. The HOA was formed as a compromise to keep peace, Mrs. Henderson said. "But that box, it looks like an old attempt to bury proof of those disputes, probably hidden to keep things quiet." Alex's stomach tightened. Could Karen's anger and disregard for the rules be fueled by this long-buried resentment? Was she fighting not just for her child's playground, but to reclaim what she believed was rightfully hers? Mrs. Henderson gave a small, knowing smile. "History has a way of resurfacing when least expected. You should be careful." Back home, Alex felt a sudden shift, a need to reach out, to find common ground with Karen before the situation exploded. The next afternoon, Alex found Karen outside, tending her garden. Taking a deep breath, Alex approached cautiously. "Karen, can we talk?" Alex asked, trying to keep their voice calm. Karen looked up, wary but silent. "I found something. Old documents buried on the field. They suggest there's been a dispute about ownership for decades." Karen's eyes flashed with surprise, and something deeper, perhaps pain or regret. "I didn't know," she said quietly. "My family has always believed that land should be for everyone." Alex nodded. "I want to find a way forward that works for both of us, and the whole neighborhood." Karen hesitated, then sighed. Maybe we need to stop fighting and figure this out together, for the kids. A fragile truce began to form. Meanwhile, Alex contacted the HOA board, sharing the discovery and suggesting a meeting to address the historical claims openly. At the next HOA meeting, the document sparked heated debate. Some neighbors sided with Alex's family's rights, others voiced support for shared access and community use. Amid the turmoil, a surprising voice spoke up, Mr. Jenkins, the longtime resident. Perhaps it's time we consider a new agreement, he said thoughtfully. One that honors history but adapts to today's needs. The board agreed to commission a legal review of the property claims and explore ways to safely open parts of the field to the community. Alex and Karen exchanged a look, tentative but hopeful. The secrets buried beneath the field had surfaced, shaking the neighborhood's foundation, but in their wake came a chance for healing. The fight for the field was no longer just about fences and rules. It was about trust, history, and the future they could build together. The weeks that followed felt like the slow turning of a great wheel. The neighborhood, once fractured by tension and accusations, began to shift toward something new, a fragile but genuine attempt at understanding. The HOA board, after consulting legal experts, confirmed that Alex's family did indeed hold the rightful deed to the field. However, the long-standing feelings of community entitlement could not be ignored. Together, the board proposed a compromise. A portion of the field would remain private and carefully maintained by Alex, while a safe, fenced-off area near the LAB entrance would be developed into a small park space open to all residents, with clear rules and supervision. Alex and Karen, surprisingly, became reluctant allies in the effort, coordinating with neighbors to design the new park and establish safety measures. On opening day, children gathered eagerly, laughter filling the air, a sound that had been missing for too long. Karen's son, now healed from his injury, was among the first to run onto the new playground, his smile radiant. Alex stood quietly at the edge, watching the community come together. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Yet beneath the surface of this hopeful new chapter, a lingering unease remained. One evening, as Alex was closing the gate to the private field, they noticed something strange. Fresh footprints near the edge of the embankment, the same area where Karen's son had fallen months ago. But these footprints were accompanied by something else, a small, shiny object partially buried in the dirt. Curious, Alex dug it out and found an old key tarnished with age. It was unlike any key they'd ever seen, ornate and mysterious. Questions flooded Alex's mind. What did this key open? Could it be connected to the rusted box and the buried documents? Was there another secret hidden beneath the field, waiting to be discovered? As the sun set behind the trees, casting long shadows over the grass, Alex realized the story was far from over. The field had given up some of its secrets, but there were more buried deep in the soil, and perhaps in the hearts of the neighbors as well. The neighborhood had found a way to move forward, but the past, with all its mysteries and tensions, still whispered beneath the surface. And Alex knew one thing for sure. Sometimes, peace comes, not from answers, but from the courage to keep searching.